Commander Jack Morrison checked his instruments one more time. The readings were still there, strange and impossible. Energy patterns that made no sense according to everything he knew about space. His ship, the USS Endeavour, drifted slowly through the darkness near the Kepler 442 system, far from Earth and any other human settlement. "Still getting those weird signals, Commander," said Lieutenant Pete Davis from the communications station. The young officer had been with Morrison for 2 years, and this was the first time he had ever sounded worried. Morrison nodded. He had been exploring deep space for 15 years, longer than anyone else in the Earth Defense Coalition. He had seen solar flares, black holes, and neutron stars, but nothing like this. The energy readings seemed to pulse in patterns, almost like they were trying to communicate something. "Any response from base?" Morrison asked. "Nothing yet, sir. We're too far out. Messages take 6 hours to reach Earth from here." Morrison's crew was small but skilled. Besides Davis, there was engineer Nancy Kim, who could fix anything that broke, and pilot Greg Walsh, who could fly through an asteroid field blindfolded. They had been together for this entire mission, 3 months of checking empty star systems for signs of alien life. The Coalition had been searching for other intelligent species for decades. Humanity had spread to dozens of worlds, but they had never found anyone else. Some people thought they were alone in the universe. Morrison had always believed otherwise. The galaxy was too big, too old, for Earth to be the only world with life. "Commander, the energy readings are getting stronger," Kim reported from her station. Her voice was calm, but Morrison could hear the tension underneath. Morrison looked at the main screen. The energy patterns were definitely getting more intense. They seemed to be coming from a point in space about 50,000 kilometers away. There was nothing visible there, no stars or planets, just empty space. But the instruments showed massive amounts of energy moving in complex patterns. "Walsh, take us closer, nice and slow." The pilot's hands moved over the controls. The Endeavour began moving toward the source of the strange signals. Morrison had explored dozens of star systems, but this felt different. The energy patterns were too organized, too purposeful to be natural. "Sir, I'm getting some kind of interference with our navigation systems," Walsh said. "The computer keeps trying to change course," Morrison frowned. The Endeavour's computers were the most advanced in the human fleet. They didn't malfunction without reason. "Override it. Keep us on course." As they got closer, the energy readings became even more intense. Morrison could feel something in the air, like the moment before a thunderstorm. The crew was getting nervous. Davis kept checking his equipment, and Kim was running diagnostics on all the ship's systems. "Commander, I think we should report this to base," Davis said. "These readings are unlike anything in our databases." Morrison considered it. Standard procedure would be to send a message back to Earth and wait for orders. But messages took 12 hours to make the round trip, and Morrison had a feeling that whatever was out there wouldn't wait that long. "Send the message," Morrison sighed, "but we're going to keep investigating. This could be the discovery we've been looking for." Davis began transmitting their findings back to Earth. Morrison watched the energy patterns on his screen. They were definitely getting more complex, more active. It was almost like something was responding to their presence. "Commander, I'm reading massive energy buildup," Kim said. Her voice was tight with worry. "Whatever's out there, it's powering up." Morrison felt his heart rate increase. In all his years of exploration, he had never encountered anything that seemed actively hostile. But the energy readings were off the charts now, far beyond anything a natural phenomenon could produce. "All stop," Morrison ordered. "Put us in defensive position." Walsh brought the ship to a halt and activated the shields. The Endeavour wasn't a warship, but it had basic defensive systems. Morrison hoped they wouldn't need them. "Sir, I'm picking up something on visual," Walsh said. "Get ahead." Morrison looked at the main screen. At first, he saw nothing but stars. Then slowly, something began to appear. It was like watching a mirage form in the desert. The outline of something huge, something that had been invisible until now. "My God," Davis whispered. The ship that appeared before them was unlike anything in human technology. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of the Endeavor. Its surface seemed to shift and change like it was made of liquid metal. Strange lights pulsed along its hull in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Morrison's mind raced. This was what humanity had been searching for. Proof that they were not alone in the universe. But the alien ship radiated power and menace. Morrison could feel his crew's fear. "Hail them," Morrison ordered. "All frequencies." Davis worked frantically at his station. "I'm transmitting on every channel we have. No response." The alien ship began to move. It was slow at first, but Morrison could see it was turning toward them. The energy reading spiked even higher. Whatever weapons or technology the aliens had, they were far beyond human understanding. "Commander, our engines are shutting down," Kim reported. "I can't override it." "It's like something is controlling our systems remotely." Morrison felt a chill. The aliens weren't just more advanced than humans. They were so far ahead that they could disable human ships without apparent effort. The Endeavor was helpless. "Keep trying to communicate," Morrison ordered. "Let them know we're peaceful." But even as he said it, Morrison knew it was probably too late. The alien ship was moving closer, and the energy readings were becoming painful to look at. Something was happening to the space around them. The stars were bending, twisting in ways that made no sense. "Sir, the hull is heating up," Kim said. "Whatever they're doing, it's affecting our entire ship." Morrison looked around at his crew. They were scared, but they were still at their posts, still trying to do their jobs. He had trained them well, but he also knew they were probably about to die. "Davis, get off one more transmission to Earth," Morrison ordered. "Tell them what we found. Tell them to be ready." Davis's fingers flew over his controls. "Message away, sir." "But I don't know if it will get through. The interference is getting worse." The alien ship was very close now. Morrison could see details on its surface, strange symbols and patterns that seemed to move on their own. The energy readings were so intense that several of the Endeavor systems were failing. "Whatever happens," Morrison said to his crew, "remember that we did our job. We found what we were looking for." The last thing Morrison saw before everything went white was the alien ship opening what looked like a massive bay door. The Endeavor was being drawn inside, pulled by forces that human science couldn't explain. Then there was nothing but light and silence, back on Earth. 6 hours later, Admiral Patricia Wells received the last transmission from the USS Endeavor. The message was broken and full of static, but the basic information was clear. Morrison had found something impossible in the emptiness of space. Something that had taken him and his crew. Search teams were dispatched immediately, but they found only scattered debris and no trace of Morrison or the Endeavor. The alien ship, if it had ever existed, was gone without a trace. Jack Morrison, humanity's greatest explorer, had vanished into the unknown depths of space, the question that haunted. Everyone was simple. Would he ever return? And if he did, what would he bring back with him? 3 years had passed since Jack Morrison disappeared. The search for him and his crew had officially ended after 8 months. The Earth Defense Coalition had moved on, training new explorers and building new ships. But some people never forgot Dr. Amanda Foster was one of those people. She had worked with Morrison for years, developing first contact procedures for when humanity finally met alien life. She knew Morrison better than anyone, and she refused to believe he was dead. Every day she checked the deep space monitoring stations, looking for any sign of him. On a cold Tuesday morning, everything changed. "Dr. Foster, you need to see this," called out technician Roy Stevens from across the monitoring room. His voice was shaking with excitement. Amanda hurried over to his station. On the screen were readings from the outer system sensors. A ship was approaching Earth from the direction of the galactic center. The energy signature was unlike anything in the Coalition database. "How long until it reaches us?" Amanda asked. "At current speed, about 6 hours, but Dr. Foster, look at this." Roy switched to a different display, the ship's configuration. "It's not in our records, but some of the basic structure. It looks human." Amanda stared at the screen. The ship was strange, with smooth curves and what looked like living metal. But underneath the alien modifications, she could see familiar patterns. The basic framework was definitely human design. "Get me Admiral Wells," Amanda said. "Right now." Admiral. Patricia Wells had aged considerably in the 3 years since Morrison's disappearance. The loss of humanity's best explorer had hit her hard. She was in her office when Amanda's call came through. "Admiral, we have a situation. A ship is approaching Earth from deep space. We think it might be Jack Morrison." Wells was silent for a long moment. "That's impossible, Amanda. Morrison has been missing for 3 years. Even if he survived, no human ship could travel that far into space." "The energy readings are off the charts," Amanda insisted. "The ship is using technology we don't understand. But the basic structure is human." "It has to be him," Wells sighed. "I'll alert Luna Station. If this is some kind of trick or trap, we need to be ready." At Luna Station, Commander Kevin Price received the alert with disbelief. He had known Morrison personally. They had served together years ago on a deep space mission. The idea that Morrison could return from the dead seemed impossible. "All security teams to alert status," Price ordered. "We have an unknown ship approaching. It might be hostile." Dr. Helen Carter, the station's chief medical officer, prepared the medical bay. If this really was Morrison, he would need immediate examination. 3 years in unknown space would have taken a serious toll on any human. The ship appeared on Luna Station's screens 6 hours later. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The hull seemed to shift and change color, and strange lights pulsed along its surface. It was definitely not built with human technology. "Incoming transmission," reported Communications Officer Lisa Park. "It's on human frequencies." "Put it through," Price ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was older, more tired, but definitely familiar. "Luna Station, this is Commander Jack Morrison requesting permission to dock. I'm alone and unarmed." The control room fell silent. Price felt his heart racing. It was impossible, but the voice was definitely Morrison's. "Jack, is that really you?" Price asked. "It's me, Kevin. I know this is hard to believe, but I'm home. I have a lot to tell you. Dock at Bay 7. We'll have security and medical teams waiting. Understood. And Kevin, be careful. I'm not the same man who left 3 years ago." The alien ship moved into the docking bay with impossible smoothness. There was no visible exhaust or thrust, just fluid movement that defied physics. The ship settled onto the deck like a living thing coming to rest. Price and his security team watched nervously as a section of the ship's hull simply melted away, forming a perfect doorway. A ramp extended from the opening made of the same shifting metal as the ship's hull. Jack Morrison walked down the ramp, and Price felt his breath catch. Morrison looked exactly the same as he had 3 years ago. No older, no signs of hardship or stress. His uniform was different, made of material that seemed to shimmer with its own light. "Hello, Kevin," Morrison said with a slight smile. "I told you I'd be back." Dr. Carter stepped forward with her medical scanner. "Commander, we need to run." "Some tests? You've been missing for 3 years?" Morrison nodded. "I understand. But Helen, what you're going to find might be disturbing. I've been changed by what happened to me." The medical examination took 4 hours. Carter ran every test she could think of, and the results were impossible. Morrison's DNA was completely human, but his neural patterns showed subtle differences. His brain activity was higher than normal, and his reflexes were faster than any human should be able to achieve. "Jack, what happened to you out there?" Carter asked. Morrison looked tired. "I was captured by something called the hegemony. They're a collective consciousness that spans the galaxy. They've been absorbing other species for millions of years." "A collective consciousness?" Carter repeated, "like a hive mind?" "More than that, they share thoughts, memories, experiences. Individual identity doesn't exist for them. They tried to make me part of their collective, but something went wrong. I resisted in ways they didn't expect." Price had been listening to the conversation. "How did you escape?" Morrison's expression grew dark. "I didn't escape. I was released." There's a faction within the hegemony that believes humanity deserves a chance to prove itself. They gave me this ship and sent me back as a warning. A warning about what? The hegemony is coming to Earth. They've been watching us for decades, studying our technology and culture. We're next on their list for absorption. Carter felt a chill. When? Soon? Maybe months, maybe a year, but they're already here. Scout. Ships have been in the outer system for weeks, cataloging our defenses. Price activated his communicator. Admiral Wells, you need to get here immediately. Morrison's back and he's brought terrible news. Wells arrived at Luna Station within hours. She found Morrison in the conference room, looking out at the stars. He turned when she entered, and she saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a depth of knowledge that was both wonderful and frightening. "Hello, Patricia," Morrison said. "I wish I was bringing better news." "Tell me everything," Wells said, taking a seat across from him. Morrison began to speak, and for the next 6 hours he told them about the hegemony. He described their technology, their methods, their absolute certainty that all intelligent life would eventually join their collective. He explained how they had captured him and his crew, how they had tried to break down his individual identity. "What happened to your crew?" Wells asked. Morrison's face grew sad. "They didn't make it. The process worked on them. They became part of the collective. I was the only one who resisted. Why? What made you different? I don't know. Maybe it was training, maybe it was stubbornness. But I held on to my humanity even when they tried to strip it away. That's what convinced the resistance faction to help me." Wells leaned forward. "Tell me about this ship you came back in." Morrison smiled slightly. "It's built with hegemony technology, but modified for human use. It's faster than anything we've ever built, and it can adapt to different environments. But more importantly, it contains detailed information about the hegemony's technology and their plans for Earth. Can we use this information to defend ourselves? Maybe the hegemony has never faced a species like humanity before. They don't understand individual creativity and independent thought. That could be our advantage." Wells stood up. "I need to brief the coalition leadership immediately." "Can you help us prepare?" Morrison nodded. "That's why I'm here." "But Patricia, you need to understand something. The Jack Morrison who disappeared 3 years ago is gone. What I learned out there, what I experienced, it changed me. I'm still human, but I'm something more now." "What do you mean?" Morrison looked out at the stars again. "I can think faster than before. I can process information in ways that don't make sense. Sometimes I know things before they happen. The hegemony's conditioning failed, but it left me with abilities I don't fully understand." Carter, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "Are you dangerous?" Morrison considered the question carefully. "I don't think so, but I'm not entirely sure. The boundary between human and alien isn't as clear as we thought. What I do know is that I'm humanity's best hope for survival," Wells nodded. "Then we'll work with whatever you've become. Can you teach us to fight them?" "I can try. But we don't have much time. The hegemony's main force is already moving toward Earth. When they arrive, they'll expect us to surrender without a fight. We need to be ready to surprise them." As if to emphasize his point, alarms began sounding throughout Luna Station. On the screens, new contacts appeared at the edge of the solar system, ships that didn't belong to any human fleet. "They're here," Morrison said quietly. "The advanced scouts, it's beginning." Wells felt her blood run cold. The war for humanity's future was about to begin, and their only hope was a man who had returned from the dead, carrying alien secrets that might save them all or destroy them in the process. The emergency meeting at Coalition headquarters brought together Earth's most important leaders. Admiral Wells sat at the head of the table, looking grim. Around her were generals, scientists, and politicians who had never imagined facing a threat like this. Jack Morrison stood before them, his alien ship's data displayed on the main screen. The images were disturbing. Star maps showing hundreds of worlds that had once been home to different species. All of them were now empty, their populations absorbed into the hegemony collective. The hegemony has been expanding for over 2 million. Years, Morrison explained. They don't destroy civilizations. They absorb them. Every species they encounter becomes part of their collective mind. Dr. Amy Rodriguez, Earth's chief strategic analyst, studied the data carefully. She had spent her career analyzing alien possibilities, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. How many species have they absorbed? Thousands, Morrison replied. Maybe tens of thousands. Each one brought their knowledge, their technology, their biological advantages into the collective. The hegemony is the combined intelligence of every species they've ever encountered. General Charles Murphy, head of Earth's military forces, leaned forward. What about resistance? Surely some species fought back. Morrison's expression darkened. Many tried. The data shows the remains of massive battles, entire star systems destroyed. But the hegemony always won. They have the combined military knowledge of every species they've absorbed. The room fell silent. The scope of the threat was overwhelming. Humanity had never faced anything like this before. Tell us about their technology, requested Dr. Linda Walsh, the Coalition's chief scientist. She had been studying the readings from Morrison's ship, and what she found was incredible. Morrison activated a holographic display. Their ships are grown, not built. They use a combination of organic and artificial materials that can adapt to any situation. They can repair themselves, change their configuration, even reproduce if necessary. How do they travel? Walsh asked. They don't use hyperspace like we do. They manipulate space itself, holding it to travel instantly across vast distances. Distance means nothing to them. Admiral Wells had been quiet, but now she spoke up. Jack, how do you know all this? You were their prisoner for 3 years, but you seem to understand their technology better than they do. Morrison hesitated. That's complicated. When they tried to absorb me into their collective, something went wrong. Instead of losing my individual identity, I gained access to their shared knowledge. I can think like they do, but I'm still human. Dr. Rodriguez looked concerned. What exactly does that mean? I can process information faster than any human should be able to. I can see patterns and connections that others miss. Sometimes I know things before they happen. Morrison paused. The boundary between human and alien isn't as clear as we thought. General Murphy stood up. Are you still human, Morrison? Or are you something else now? I'm still human, Morrison said firmly, but I'm also something more. The hegemony's conditioning failed because they couldn't understand human individuality. They expected me to surrender my identity, but I held on to it even while gaining access to their collective knowledge. The implications were staggering. Morrison had become something unprecedented, a bridge between human and alien consciousness. What? Can you tell us about their weaknesses? Wells asked. Morrison smiled for the first time since the meeting began. That's the important part. The hegemony's greatest strength is also their greatest weakness. They think as one mind, which makes them incredibly efficient and coordinated, but they can't understand true individuality or independent thought. How does that help us? Murphy asked. They expect their enemies to think logically, to follow predictable patterns. They've absorbed thousands of species, but they've never encountered anything like human creativity and stubbornness. We don't always make logical decisions, and that confuses them. Dr. Walsh leaned forward. You're saying our unpredictability is an advantage? Exactly. When they captured me, they expected me to break down under their conditioning. Every other species had. But humans are different. We can choose to sacrifice ourselves for others, to make decisions that go against our own interests. The hegemony can't understand that. Morrison activated another display showing the solar system. Red dots marked the positions of hegemony scout ships. They're studying us right now, trying to understand our technology and tactics. But they're making assumptions, based on every other species they've encountered. What kind of assumptions? Rodriguez asked. They think we'll surrender when we see how powerful they are. They believe all intelligent life eventually chooses survival over resistance. They can't comprehend that humans might choose to fight, even when victory is impossible. The room was quiet as everyone absorbed this information. The idea that humanity's apparent weaknesses might be strengths was both hopeful and terrifying. There's something else, Morrison continued. The hegemony isn't completely unified. There are factions within the collective. Some believe that absorbing other species makes them stronger. Others think it makes them weaker by diluting their original purpose. You mentioned a resistance faction, Wells said. Tell us about them, Morrison nodded. They're led by remnants of one of the first species the hegemony absorbed. They've retained some individual identity within the collective, and they believe the hegemony has become too large and complex to function properly. Are they willing to help us? They already have. They gave me this ship and the knowledge I needed to return to Earth. They want humanity to prove that resistance is possible, that individual species can maintain their identity even when facing the collective. General Murphy looked skeptical. Why should we trust them? They're part of the same collective that wants to absorb us. Because they're the only hope we have, Morrison replied. The resistance faction can't openly oppose the hegemony, but they can provide information and create opportunities. They want us to succeed. Dr. Walsh had been analyzing the technical data. Jack, the technology in your ship is incredible. Can we reproduce it? Some of it, yes. But not quickly enough to make a difference in a direct confrontation. The hegemony has had millions of years to perfect their technology. We've had 3 years to prepare. Then how do we fight them? Wells asked. Morrison's expression grew serious. We don't fight them the way they expect. We use tactics they can't predict or counter. We make them think we're weak and scattered, then hit them where they don't expect it. Guerrilla warfare, Murphy said thoughtfully. Small units, independent. Operations, unpredictable attacks. Exactly. But it has to be more than that. We need to show them something they've never seen before. We need to demonstrate that humans will sacrifice themselves for each other, that we can work together while still maintaining our individuality. Dr. Rodriguez had been quiet, but now she spoke up. Jack, what happens if we lose? What happens to humanity? Morrison was quiet for a long moment. If we lose, humanity ceases to exist as an individual species. We become part of the collective, our knowledge and abilities absorbed into their shared consciousness. Our children will be born as drones, serving the collective without question. And, if we win? If we win, we prove that the hegemony can be defeated. We show other species that resistance is possible. We might even free some of the species they've already absorbed. The weight of responsibility was overwhelming. The fate of humanity and possibly countless other species rested on their decisions. How long do we have? Wells asked Morrison. Checked a device on his wrist, something that looked like it was grown rather than built. The main fleet is already moving toward Earth. They'll arrive in 6 months, maybe less. 6 months to prepare for a war against a collective that has conquered the galaxy for 2 million years, Murphy said grimly. It's not impossible, Morrison said. But it will require us to become something we've never been before. We need to work together like never before, while still maintaining the individual creativity that makes us human. Wells stood up. Then, that's what we'll do. Morrison, I'm putting you in charge of our defensive preparations. You know them better than anyone. Morrison nodded. I'll need access to our best people and resources. And Patricia, there's something else you need to know. The hegemony isn't just coming to absorb us. They're coming to test us. If we prove worthy, we might survive. If not, we'll be eliminated completely. What does that mean? It means this isn't just about winning or losing. It's about proving that humanity deserves to exist as an independent species. We have 6 months to show them that we're worth preserving. As the meeting ended, everyone understood the stakes. The war for humanity's future was about to begin, and their only hope was a man who had returned from the dead, carrying alien knowledge and a plan that might save them all. The next 6 months changed everything about human civilization. Every shipyard, every factory, every research facility was working around the clock. The coalition had declared a state of emergency, and the entire human race was preparing for the fight of their lives. Dr. Benjamin Clark led the team trying to understand Morrison's alien technology. His laboratory was filled with pieces of the strange ship that had brought Morrison home. The metal seemed alive, shifting and adapting to different conditions. When they heated it, it became stronger. When they cooled it, it became more flexible. "This material doesn't follow any laws of physics we understand," Clark told his assistant, Dr. Susan White. "It's like it thinks for itself." White nodded, studying a sample under her microscope. "The molecular structure changes depending on what we do to it. It's not just adaptive, it's intelligent." Across the lab, engineers were trying to build weapons using the alien technology. The energy systems were beyond human understanding, but Morrison had provided detailed instructions. Slowly, they began to create weapons that could disrupt the hegemony's collective communications. The biggest challenge was reproducing the adaptive armor Morrison's ship used. The alien material could repair itself and change its properties instantly. Human ships equipped with this armor would be much harder to destroy. "How are we doing on production?" Clark asked White. "We've managed to equip 12 ships so far. It's slow work. The alien material has to be grown, not manufactured. Each piece takes weeks to develop." Morrison visited the laboratory every day, offering guidance and answering questions. But each visit left the scientists more confused about what he had become. He could understand the alien technology instinctively, as if he had been working with it for years. "Jack, how do you know how this works?" Clark asked during one visit. Morrison touched a piece of the alien metal, and it immediately began to glow. "I can feel it. It's hard to explain. The hegemony's conditioning left me with abilities I don't fully understand." Dr. Amanda Foster was documenting these changes in Morrison. She had been his friend before his disappearance, and now she was studying what he had become. Her reports were classified at the highest levels, but the implications were disturbing. "His brain activity is unlike anything we've seen," Foster told Admiral Wells during a private meeting. "He processes information faster than our best computers. Sometimes he seems to know things before they happen. Is he still human?" Wells asked. Foster hesitated. "Physically, yes. His DNA is completely human, but mentally he's become something new. The boundary between human and alien consciousness isn't as clear as we thought. Is he dangerous? I don't think so. He's still Jack Morrison, still driven by human values and emotions. But he's also something more. He represents a new kind of evolution, a fusion of human individuality with alien knowledge. Meanwhile, military training had completely changed. General Murphy was working with Morrison to develop new tactics that would confuse the hegemony. Traditional military thinking was being thrown out the window. Captain Jake Miller was one of the pilots selected for the new training program. His squadron was learning to fight in ways that seemed completely crazy. They practiced making decisions based on emotion rather than logic, embracing chaos instead of order. "Forget everything you learned in flight school," Morrison told Miller's squadron. "The hegemony expects you to fight like soldiers. Instead, you need to fight like humans." "What does that mean?" Miller asked. "It means making decisions that don't make sense. Attacking when you should retreat. Retreating when you should attack." The collective mind can predict logical behavior, but it can't understand human intuition. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos was assigned as Morrison's military liaison. She watched him train the pilots with a mixture of admiration and concern. Morrison could predict enemy movements before they happened, as if he was reading the collective's mind. "How do you do it?" Santos asked him after one training session. Morrison looked tired. "I can feel them sometimes. The collective consciousness touches the edge of my mind. It's like hearing voices in another room. I can't make out the words, but I can sense the emotions. Doesn't that worry you?" "Every day, but it's also our advantage. I can anticipate their moves because I understand how they think. The challenge is teaching our people to think in ways the collective can't predict." The human fleet was being reorganized into small independent units. Instead of large battleships working together, humanity would fight with dozens of smaller ships operating independently. Each unit would make its own decisions without waiting for orders from command. This was the opposite of how the hegemony fought. Their ships worked in perfect coordination, like fingers on the same hand. But that coordination depended on constant communication. If that communication could be disrupted, their advantage would disappear. Every ship needs to be able to operate alone, Morrison explained to the fleet commanders. No central command, no coordinated attacks, pure chaos from their perspective. Admiral, Wells worried about the plan. How do we coordinate our attacks if every ship is acting independently? We don't coordinate. That's the point. The hegemony will expect us to have a battle plan, a strategy they can counter. Instead, we give them nothing but randomness. Dr. Rodriguez was analyzing the psychological aspects of the coming battle. She had studied Morrison's reports about hegemony conditioning and was developing countermeasures for human crews. The collective tries to break down individual identity, she explained to a group of ship captains. They'd bombard their targets with thoughts and emotions from thousands of different minds. Most species can't handle that mental pressure. How do we resist it? Asked Captain Rachel Stone. By holding on to what makes you human. Your memories, your relationships, your individual quirks and flaws. The collective can't understand why someone would choose to remain imperfect when perfection is offered. The training was intense and often dangerous. Pilots learned to make split-second decisions based on instinct rather than training. Ship crews practiced operating under extreme stress. While maintaining their individual personalities, some people couldn't handle the pressure. Several pilots requested transfers to conventional units. The idea of fighting an enemy that could read minds and predict behavior was terrifying, but others thrived in the chaos. Commander Tony Lewis became one of Morrison's best students, learning to pilot his ship with an unpredictability that even Morrison couldn't predict. The trick is not to think, Lewis explained to other pilots. The moment you start planning, you become predictable. Trust your instincts and react to whatever happens. As the months passed, reports came in from the outer system. The hegemony scout ships were increasing their activity. They were studying human defensive positions and cataloging Earth's technology. Morrison monitored these reports with growing concern. They're learning faster than I expected. The collective is adapting to our preparations. Can they counter our tactics? Wells asked. Not yet, but they're trying to understand our unpredictability. That's dangerous. If they figure out how to predict chaos, we lose our only advantage. The final month of preparation was the most intense. Every ship in the human fleet was modified with alien technology. Weapon systems were upgraded with energy disruptors that could interfere with hegemony communications. Armor was enhanced with adaptive materials that could repair themselves, but the most important preparation was mental. Human crews trained to maintain their individuality under extreme pressure. They practiced thinking in ways that would confuse the collective mind. Morrison spent his final weeks visiting every ship in the fleet. He spoke to crews about what they would face, preparing them for an enemy unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Remember who you are, he told one group of young pilots. Remember your families, your dreams, your fears. The collective will try to take all of that away from you. Don't let them. What if we're not strong enough? Asked pilot Sarah Davis. Morrison looked at her seriously. Then we die as humans rather than live as drones, but I don't think it will come to that. You're stronger than you know. Dr. Foster continued studying Morrison throughout the preparation period. His abilities were growing stronger, but so was his humanity. The alien knowledge hadn't replaced his human nature. It had enhanced it. He's becoming something we've never seen before, Foster reported to Wells. A perfect fusion of human creativity and alien intelligence. If we survive this war, Jack Morrison might represent the future of human evolution. As the 6 months came to an end, long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures approaching from deep space. The hegemony's main fleet was almost here, and humanity was as ready as they could be. The final test was about to begin. Everything they had learned, everything they had built, everything they had become would be tested against an enemy that had conquered the galaxy for 2 million years. Morrison stood on the bridge of the command station, watching the approaching fleet on the main screen. Thousands of alien ships, each one larger and more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. "Are we ready?" Wells asked him. Morrison nodded. "As ready as we can be. The real question isn't whether we can win. It's whether we can prove that humanity deserves to survive as an independent species." The hegemony fleet appeared without warning. One moment space was empty, the next it was filled with thousands of massive alien ships. They emerged from folded space in perfect formation, surrounding Earth and all its colonies simultaneously. Admiral Wells watched from the command center as the enemy fleet took position. Each hegemony ship was enormous, dwarfing even humanity's largest vessels. Their organic hulls pulsed with alien energy, and strange lights flickered across their surfaces like thoughts made visible. "How many ships?" Wells asked. "Over 3,000. "In the main fleet," reported Communications Officer Dan Foster. "More appearing every minute. They're taking positions around every human world." Morrison stood beside Wells, his expression calm despite the overwhelming odds. He could feel the collective consciousness pressing against his mind, thousands of alien thoughts trying to understand humanity's defenses. "They're confused," Morrison said quietly. "Our scattered formation doesn't make sense to them. They expected U.S. to group our ships together for a coordinated defense." "Will that help us?" Wells asked. "It might. They're trying to predict our strategy, but we don't have one. That's making them hesitate." A transmission came from the hegemony fleet. The voice spoke perfect English, but it sounded like thousands of people talking at once. "Humans of Earth, you will surrender your vessels and prepare for integration into the hegemony collective. Resistance is futile. We have absorbed thousands of species more advanced than yours." Wells activated the General Communication Channel. "This is Admiral Patricia Wells of the Earth Defense Coalition. We reject your demands. Humanity will not surrender." There was a pause before the collective voice responded. "Your resistance is illogical. We offer you immortality, perfect knowledge, freedom from conflict and suffering. Why do you choose destruction over evolution?" Morrison stepped forward and spoke into the communicator. "Because we choose to remain human. Individual identity is more valuable to us than collective perfection." Another pause, longer this time. "You are the human who escaped our conditioning. Your transformation was incomplete. You will be recaptured and properly integrated." "I don't think so," Morrison replied. "The first attack came without warning. Beams of energy lanced out from the hegemony ships, targeting human vessels throughout the solar system. Several human ships were destroyed instantly, their shields overwhelmed by the alien weapons, but the human response was immediate and chaotic. Instead of falling back to defensive positions, human ships scattered in all directions. Some attacked the nearest enemy vessels while others fled toward the outer system. There was no pattern, no coordination, just pure randomness. Captain Jake Miller led his squadron in a seemingly suicidal charge directly at the largest hegemony ship. His pilots followed him without question, their ships weaving unpredictably through enemy fire. "Remember, don't think," Miller transmitted to his squadron. "Just react." The hegemony ships tried to track the human fighters, but their movements made no sense. The collective consciousness couldn't predict what the humans would do next because the humans didn't know themselves. Miller's ship was hit by enemy fire, but the adaptive armor Morrison's team had developed absorbed most of the damage. The alien metal shifted and flowed, sealing hull breaches and rerouting power around damaged systems. "I'm hit but still flying," Miller reported. "These new systems actually work." Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos was commanding a group of destroyers. Near Mars, instead of engaging the enemy directly, her ships were using hit-and-run tactics, striking quickly and disappearing before the hegemony could respond. "Target their communication arrays," Santos ordered. "Make it harder for them to coordinate." Her ships fired energy disruptors at the alien vessels. The weapons had been designed using Morrison's knowledge of hegemony technology. They didn't do much physical damage, but they interfered with the collective's ability to share information. The effect was immediate. Several hegemony ships began moving erratically, their perfect coordination disrupted. The collective consciousness depended on constant communication, and the humans were making that impossible. Commander Tony Lewis was leading the most dangerous mission of all. His ship was flying directly into the heart of the enemy formation, carrying a special weapon Morrison had designed. The plan was insane, but that was exactly why it might work. "Tony, are you sure about this?" Captain Rachel Stone asked over the communication channel. She was leading a diversionary attack to cover Lewis's approach. "No," Lewis replied honestly, "but that's never stopped me before." Lewis's ship dodged through enemy fire. It's adaptive. Hull shifting to deflect energy beams. The hegemony ships were trying to intercept him, but they couldn't predict his course because he kept changing it based on pure instinct. Morrison was monitoring the battle from his own ship, a hybrid vessel that combined human and alien technology. He could feel the collective consciousness becoming more frustrated as their predictions failed. "They're starting to panic," Morrison reported to Wells. "The collective has never faced an enemy they couldn't understand. How is that possible?" "They've conquered thousands of species. Because every other species they encountered was logical. They made sensible decisions based on available information. Humans don't always do that. We make choices based on emotion, loyalty, and sometimes pure stubbornness." The battle raged for hours. Human ships were being destroyed, but they were taking hegemony vessels with them. More importantly, the collective was becoming confused and disorganized. Captain Stone's ship was badly damaged, but she refused to retreat. Her crew was fighting desperately to keep their weapons online. When her main guns failed, she ordered ramming speed. "This is for Earth," Stone transmitted as her ship slammed into a hegemony vessel. The explosion destroyed both ships, but it also created a gap in the enemy formation. Lewis used that gap to reach his target, the largest ship in the hegemony fleet. This was their command vessel, the heart of the collective consciousness. Morrison's weapon was designed to disrupt their central coordination. "I'm at the target," Lewis reported, beginning the approach. The weapon Morrison had given him wasn't meant to destroy the hegemony ship. Instead, it would introduce chaos directly into their collective mind. It was based on human brainwave patterns, thoughts and emotions that the collective couldn't process. Lewis activated the weapon and felt his mind connect with the alien consciousness. For a moment, he experienced what it was like to be part of the collective. Thousands of voices, all thinking the same thoughts, all working toward the same goals. But then his human individuality crashed into their perfect unity. His memories of Earth, his love for his family, his fear and hope and dreams flooded into the collective mind. The aliens had never experienced emotions like these before. The effect was devastating. The collective consciousness, built on perfect unity and logical thought, couldn't handle the chaos of human emotion. The disruption spread through their network like a virus, causing confusion and panic among billions of drone minds. Hegemony ships throughout the solar system began shutting down. Their crews, suddenly experiencing individual thought for the first time in millions of years, didn't know how to function. The perfect coordination that had made them invincible was breaking apart. Morrison felt the moment when the collective consciousness fractured. Billions of minds that had been united suddenly found themselves alone, thinking independent thoughts. Many of them were terrified by the experience. "It's working," Morrison reported. "The collective is falling apart." Lewis's ship was destroyed in the aftermath of the weapon's activation, but his sacrifice had changed everything. The hegemony fleet was drifting powerlessly through space, their crews struggling to understand what it meant to be individuals. Admiral Wells watched in amazement as the alien ship simply stopped fighting. "Is it over?" Morrison was monitoring the collective's communications, listening to the chaos in their shared consciousness. "Not over, changed. The collective is breaking into fragments. Some of them are remembering what it was like to be independent species. A new transmission came from the hegemony fleet, but this time it was different. Instead of the unified voice of the collective, there were dozens of different voices, speaking different languages. Humans, one voice said in broken English.
We.
Remember now, we were like you once, individual, free. Another voice joined in. The collective made us forget who we were. Your weapon has awakened our memories. Morrison smiled. This was what the resistance faction within the hegemony had hoped for. They had given him the knowledge to create a weapon that wouldn't destroy the collective, but transform it. What happens now? Wells asked. Now they choose, Morrison replied. Each species that was absorbed into the collective can decide for themselves. Some will want to remain united. Others will want to be free again. Over the following days, the situation in the solar system stabilized. Many hegemony ships simply left, carrying newly awakened species back to their homeworlds. Others remained, wanting to learn more about humanity and the gift of individual thought. The collective consciousness still existed, but it was no longer absolute. The rigid unity that had allowed them to conquer the galaxy was broken.